Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a massive swing. We're starting with a hugely recognizable pop culture controversy, and literally zooming all the way out to uncover this fascinating, almost epic, philosophical framework about human history. We're going to dive into an analysis that takes a headline-grabbing moment in the music industry and uses it to explore the ultimate destiny of South Korean culture. It's a journey from red carpets and gold trophies all the way to generational missions and, well, the future of humanity.
All right, let's just dive right into the inciting incident here. We're starting with the U.S. Recording Academy, the organization behind the Grammys, making a pretty significant change. They created a specific Asian pop category. Now, on paper, sure, that sounds like a basic administrative update, right? But according to our source material, this actually sparked a really profound cultural debate. It forced the whole industry to stop and ask a critical question. When you put a specific region's music into its own separate box, are you being inclusive, or are you actually segregating it from the mainstream?
To truly wrap our heads around this, we need to impartially break down the two very different viewpoints the source text highlights regarding this new category. On one side, you have the argument for inclusivity. The rationale here is that a dedicated category ensures more Asian music actually gets recognized on the global stage. It guarantees a spotlight. But on the other hand, kind of behind the velvet rope, is the argument for cultural segregation. Critics argue that by carving out an Asian category, Western pop is subtly protected as the universal default standard of music, while everything else gets treated as an exotic subgenre. So the big debate is whether this category is a stepping stone or a ceiling.
And that brings us to a massive reaction highlighted in the text, BTS actually deciding to withhold their work from consideration. Their stance was clear and really powerful. They believe that music absolutely shouldn't be divided up by region or language. It's art, so it should just be judged entirely on its own merit. This boycott raises a huge fundamental question for the source text. Should South Korea keep trying to adapt to the old rules of the international stage, or is it time for them to just start making new ones entirely?
To answer that, the source introduces this absolutely fascinating concept called the frame. The text argues that despite all their immense, record-breaking global success, Korean culture is actually stuck in an old operational mold right now. They're operating within a conceptual limit that traps their cultural activities. The idea is that as long as artists are just trying to fit into pre-existing Western categories, or, just chasing mainstream popularity, they're trapped in this frame. And until they break out of it, they literally cannot achieve true global leadership.
So how do you break out? Well, the source makes this super crucial distinction between cultural activity and cultural business. Cultural activity is basically what's been happening up until now. It's absorbing global knowledge, researching, practicing, playing music. It's playing around with the tools. But cultural business, that is entirely different. That's a massive step up. Cultural business means executing actions that broadly benefit humanity as a whole. It's the difference between merely studying something and actually using that knowledge to lead and heal the world.
Now, this whole idea of broadly benefiting humanity, it's not just some catchy PR slogan. It's actually rooted in a really profound philosophical concept called hongik ingen. Our source presents this neutrally as a compelling theory for South Korea's ultimate cultural purpose. Hongik ingen is an ancient philosophy that translates to broadly benefit the human world, and the text argues this isn't just historical trivia, it's the exact blueprint for what Korean artists have to do next. They aren't just here to sell records anymore. Their ultimate purpose, their cultural business, is to actually uplift the human race.
To really show the weight of this mission, the source brings up a totally fascinating cultural touchstone, Michael Sandel's famous book and lecture series, Justice. Surprisingly, when that super dense philosophy book hit South Korea, it became an absolute pop culture phenomenon. It threw the whole concept of justice into the national spotlight. But our source makes a really bold claim here. They argue that while the West posed the question of what is justice over 2 decades ago, they haven't actually found the ultimate answer. The text frames it as South Korea's historical mission to take all this global knowledge, synthesize it, discover the true right law or universal truth, and then actually present that answer back to the world.
And the source argues this mission has literally been generations in the making. Looking at the history, right after World War II, the baby boomer generation in Korea was taught with incredible discipline, pushed extremely hard to rebuild and just absorb all the global knowledge they could get their hands on. Then, the Gen Xers of the 90s were taught to take that absorbed knowledge and start building on top of it, which leads us to today, the digital generation. They are the inheritors of all that accumulated energy, and their role isn't to just stay inside Korea. Their role is to take this evolved culture directly onto the global stage.
And man, when they did step onto that global stage, total shockwave. The source describes the utter surprise of the Western world. Because historically, the West viewed itself as the sole origin of high-level music. The text even mentions the legacy of Beethoven, where Western music was seen as almost divinely inspired. So the idea that artists from South Korea could just suddenly rise up and shake the very foundation of the global music industry, it was completely unexpected. The old establishment was shaken because the sheer scale and quality of Korea's digital generation simply couldn't be contained or blocked.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. How exactly does pop music pull off this grand global mission of benefiting humanity? The source argues it all comes down to one core mechanism: the lyrics. There's this fantastic quote in the text that explains it perfectly. Rhythm can come from a power line, but lyrics are made by humans. The argument here is that a catchy beat or a cool melody, that's just physics, right? It's just vibration. But the lyrics, that's the lifeblood. The lyrics are the actual vessel for the message, and human messages are what genuinely change the world. Because those lyrics are so incredibly powerful, the text actually issues a pretty stark warning about the future of K-pop. To avoid hitting a wall, artists like BTS and Blackpink can't just keep doing what they've always done. If they just repeat trends and rehash old themes for the sake of popularity, the text warns they're eventually going to collapse. Instead, they have to start infusing their music with really high-quality messages. They need to inject profound messages of hope for humanity. They have to write lyrics that give actual courage to global youth who are struggling out there. Basically, the music has to evolve from just entertainment into, like, an actual lifeline.
Which brings us to the climax of the source's roadmap. It's this three-step journey from entertainer to global leader. Step 1 is popularity. That's what K-pop has definitely achieved right now. They've got the world's attention. But step 2 is respect. And you only get respect by delivering high-quality energy and meaningful messages through those lyrics we just talked about. And finally, there's step 3, reverence. By consistently guiding and uplifting the youth, these artists transition from just being pop stars into truly revered leaders of the global youth.
But getting to that final step, it is incredibly perilous. The source text puts a huge emphasis on the danger of the void. Right now, these young artists have reached just unimaginable heights of popularity. But the text bluntly warns that without proper teachers, without wise mentors to guide them on how to actually handle all this energy, they are at serious risk of collapsing. Popularity is totally fleeting, and the psychological pressure of trying to maintain it without a deeper, guiding purpose, without transitioning into that phase of respect and reverence, is enough to completely destroy them.
So that brings us to our final thought. We started with a Grammy category dispute, and we've somehow arrived at the destiny of global culture. The source leaves us with a massive paradigm shift. It's no longer a question of whether the West is going to accept K-pop. The real question is, what is K-pop going to do with the world now that it has our undivided attention? As these artists stand at the very top of the global stage, are they ready to move beyond the frame of simple entertainment? Are they truly ready to shoulder the immense philosophical responsibility of guiding humanity's future? It's a completely fascinating lens to view pop culture through, and one that's for sure going to change how you listen to the next global hit.